Hello guys, today we are going to talk about the October 2025 Visa Bulletin um, that was released recently, and I will be focusing on employment-based categories from EB1 through EB3 other workers. Let's start with the rest of the world category analysis um, and compare to my predictions that I made in the past. On the left side, you would see my calculation of forward movement from the Visa Bulletin and in comparison with September 2025 final action date table. How far the dates have been moved is what I mentioned here. And also I'm going to compare that actual movement that happened in October 2025 Visa Bulletin with my worst case predictions that I made in the past and also the best case scenario that I made before, right? Let's quickly go over those and I will give my speculations around it. It may not be the reason, but that's my opinion and analysis here. So when it comes to the October 2025 Visa Bulletin, EB1 rest of the world stayed current as expected, and it will stay current throughout most of the time, fiscal year, throughout the fiscal year. And that's known fact. And EB2 rest of the world, I see that in the final action date table, it moved forward 3 months. And in the data filing table, the EB2 rest of the world was moved forward 10 months. And we know that for October 2025 Visa Bulletin, USCIS have pointed out to use the data filing table, and it is the expected outcome because usually in the first few months of fiscal year, um, USCIS utilizes the data filing table to accept the I-485 applications and quantify that and then they start to make changes in the final action date table to see how far they can move based on the demand that is coming through the earlier filings in the start of the fiscal year. So good news is that we have 10 months forward movement EB2 for EB2 rest of the world, and so applicants are going to file whoever have the priority dates in that. So which means the final action date table for rest of the world, EB2 was moved up to 15th of July 2024, right? Um, so, and based on that, and also in the final action date table, we had 3 months forward movement from the September 2025 Visa Bulletin. So that's another good news that it is um, foreseeing the available visas utilization here. Okay. And we will continue to see more forward movements for EB2 rest of the world because there are close to, if in an ideal case scenario, if not considering any spillovers here, because we do not have the um, uh, the limit applied in the fiscal year 2026 yet because that's not released by the time I'm making this video. So I do not know how much visa numbers are applied for each of these categories or worldwide limit applied overall for this fiscal year. But if I consider just the ideal case scenario of 140K applications or visa numbers for the fiscal year, then we would have close to 28,000 for EB2 alone, right? For the rest of the world. So um, and we have 3 months forward movement in final action date table. So I think it would move forward further along the way. And even in the data filing table, I might see a little more movements there. So, but if I compare my prediction with this actual movement, so EB2, rest of the world here, it shows 3 months. If I go and compare the worst case scenario, EB2, I predicted worst case scenario as 1.5 months forward movement, and the best case scenario I had in the final action date table as 4 months forward movement, which is close enough prediction in terms of FAD table. And when it comes to the data filing table, best case scenario I predicted for EB2 rest of the world is 1 year. And the worst case scenario I predicted for data filing table is also 1 year. So when I compare that also, it's close enough, right? Because I predicted as 10 months forward movement. So 2 months shortage, but close enough. And I would still think that it would move close to 1 year or even a little more than that in the coming quarters. We would see that, in my opinion. Let's keep an eye on that. Anyway, good news for the EB2 rest of the world in this category. So EB3 skilled rest of the world. In the final action date table, there was no movement in the October 2025 Visa Bulletin. And in EB3 skilled rest of the world for data filing table, I see that there was a 3 months forward movement done. So this means that there will be applicants who are up to 1st of December 2021, 1st of July 2023. They would be able to file the I-485 applications, and based on which the final action date table will start to move. And it is just a temporary state of no change here, right? It's not going to stay like this forever, because in an ideal case scenario, we would have close to 21,000 visa numbers available for EB3 skilled. And it is currently it is kept no change, because maybe the USCIS is trying to observe and check how many incoming applicants are coming in using the data filing table, and then appropriately they will start moving the dates here in the EB3 skilled final action date table for rest of the world. And also I'm anticipating that even in the data filing table, the EB3 skilled will start to move forward in the coming months, for sure. And I'm speculating that it is not going to stay like this for the entire fiscal year. It will start to move. It is just a temporary state for now. But when I compare this with my prediction that I made between worst case and best case scenario, so EB3 skilled here, the actual movement is no change. But when I compare that with my worst case scenario, I did predict close enough, which is I thought it would move at least a week, right? It's closer to no change. And then the best case scenario in the final action date table for EB3 skilled, I did 5 months of forward movement, right? So even though it did not meet the best case scenario, it did close enough call for the worst case scenario in this category for EB3 skilled, right? And when it comes to data filing table, there was a 3 months forward movement for EB3 skilled. But when I compare that with my worst case scenario, I did 1 year, 2 months. And then in the best case scenario, there is 1 year, 9 months for the EB3 skill. This is more on the data filing table, right? And of course, it did not meet that kind of jump. But what I'm still hoping for is that it will check and adjust these movements in a quarterly basis. And it might come a long way because we have enough, I think, at least by the calculation, it showed some numbers available versus the demand. If anything changed, we will see in the latest reports coming out, which I'm waiting for, and I will keep you posted on what changed in this matter. But I think this is more about making a caution and calculated risk of incremental forward movements here, from my opinion. So it's just a temporary. It's not going to be permanently staying like this. Okay, so let's stay positive on that. EB3 other workers rest of the world. It moved in the final action date table. It moved 1 week forward movement, which is to 1st of December 2021. Sorry, this is on the data filing table. So it moved 15th of July 2021 from 8th of July 2021. And then in the data filing table, it moved forward close to 5 months and 3 weeks, which is really good news for EB3 other workers in this case. And that moved up to, I think, 1st of December 2021. And when I compare this in my prediction, that for the final action date table, it moved 1 week, but I predicted in the worst case scenario that there may be no change. And in the best case scenario, I predicted it would move up to 3.5 months. So now, of course, it was close enough to the worst case scenario. And good news is that it moved forward a week from that. In the data filing table, it had 5 months, 3 weeks. I predicted in the worst case scenario as 8 months forward movement. Um, and then best case scenario, I predicted as 11 months forward movement, right? But it was close enough for at least the worst case scenario between 8 months and 6 months here, right? Um, okay, but when it comes to my opinion about EB3 other workers at this time, the ideal visa limit here is going to be 7,200, right? So like 7,200 per fiscal year based on the 140K assignment. If it is more than that, it might be a little more. But I would think that you would start to see the movements, slower movements, but maybe some big jumps in the quarterly basis um, on the final action date table. And there are chances that it could move just beyond 6 months. It could move even up to 8 months here. Um, but let's watch for that, right? It's definitely foreseeable forward movements up to that expectation that I said just now. Um, and I still need to wait for what is the numerical limit applied in the fiscal year, which I don't have any visibility to it yet, as I mentioned as well. So that is about rest of the world category. If you have any questions related to this, please post it in the comment section and I'll be happy to collaborate and answer as best as I can. But nothing to worry about. In my opinion, things will start to move pretty soon in a good way. And I think we have good sign in the data filing table that tells us that there are forward movements that's going to happen in an incremental fashion for certain categories. Let's quickly go into China date movements. So if you look at the October 2025 Visa Bulletin for the China forward movements, we see that almost all of the categories have forward movements, which is definitely a good news for them, for the China country cap. And then you can see for final action date table, EB1 China moved a month and a week forward. And in the data filing table, it moved 4 months and 2 weeks forward, which is good news. And when I compare that with my prediction here, in worst case scenario, I predicted for final action date table for China is that it would move up to 2 weeks for the final action date. And then the data filing table, I said it might move up to 3.5 months. And similarly for the best case scenario, I said it would move up to 1 month for EB1 China, and then it would move up to 4.5 months in the data filing table for EB1 China. So collectively, you can see that it was close enough for the data filing table prediction where it moved close to 5 months in the best case scenario comparison, right? For the EB1 China. And then EB1 China final action date table is much farther than I predicted in the worst case scenario. Um, and um, and I did predict 1 month in the best case scenario for the EB1 final action date table, which is definitely close enough here. It says 1 month, 1 week in the actual movement, which is good. That's expected, right? EB2 China, it moved in the final action date table, it moved 3 months and 2 weeks. In the data filing table, it moved forward 11 months, right? Again, it's great news there. And when I compare that with my predictions for worst case and best case, EB2 worst case scenario in the final action date table, I said there may not be any change. And the data filing table, I said 2 months forward movement. And when I look at the best case scenario, I said EB2 could move up to 1 month in the final action date table and 3 months in the data filing table. So overall, it did much better than that, right? So in case of both best case and worst case scenario comparatively, it went beyond. So it went for 3.5 months and the 11 months timeline, which is great news for the EB2 China. EB3 skilled China in the final action date table, it moved forward 3 months. And then data filing table, it moved forward 1 year and a week. This is definitely a great news for EB3 skilled China. And during my prediction in the worst case scenario, I did predict 2 weeks forward movement for worst case scenario in the final action date table. And the data filing table, I predicted for 5 months forward movement. And in the best case scenario, I said EB3 skilled China will move forward in 1.5 months in the final action date table. And then, you know, the data filing table, I said it would move forward 6 months. But again, it did a much better job than that. Seems like it moved way beyond than I anticipated. So it's a great news for EB3 skilled China. EB3 other workers China, the actual movement in the final action date table is 7 months forward movement. And also in the data filing table in EB3 other workers, it's anticipated to move up to 10 months forward movement, right? Again, it's beyond what I predicted in my worst case and best case scenario. So in the worst case scenario, final action date table, I said no change. And the data filing 5 months forward movement for a EB3 other workers China. And the best case scenario, I said EB3 other workers in the final action date table would move forward 1 month, and then EB3 other workers data filing table for China would move forward up to 6 months in the best case scenario. But then again, it went beyond what I predicted. So China, definitely three categories, EB2, EB3 skilled and EB3 other workers went beyond what I anticipated. And EB1 was close enough, very close enough from my prediction. So again, it's a great news for China in the October 2025 Visa Bulletin. And for the fiscal year 2026 is going to be a good forward movement for China, seems like. Okay. Let's talk about India date movements in the October 2025 Visa Bulletin, right? So if you look at EB1 India in the final action date table, there was no change in the October 2025 Visa Bulletin. And in the data filing table for EB1 India, it moved forward 1 year. And it is definitely a great news for EB1 India in this case, that USCIS is going to accept the I-485 applicants for the dates for the period to date up to 15th of April 2023. So definitely it's a great forward movement in the data filing table for this category, as there were many people worried about date movements of EB1 India. And the I will come to the reasoning. So why you didn't see any change in the EB1 India in final action date table, right? I think it goes back to the concept of observing the incoming applicants in my speculation, right? It's about, okay, they wanted to see the demand of, by moving the priority dates up to 1 year in the data filing table, because as USAS is pointing out, the data filing table to utilize in the October 2025 Visa Bulletin, that means they're going to see how many applicants are coming in, what's going to be the demand, and based on which the EB1 India final action date table will start to move forward. Right now, there is no change because in the data in the final action date table, we still see the 15th of February 2022. So in my opinion, it would move forward slowly. But again, I'm not disappointing anybody, but it is the fact that depends on the backlog, whether it would move up to 1 year or not, that's questionable, right? In the final action date table. It might move forward based on the demand that is coming in. So we need to wait and watch how far it's going to move forward. And again, as we do not, as I always said, and in the past, and also in the video here, right now I do not have the visibility towards what is the numeric limit applied in the current fiscal year, and by the time I make this video, I do not have that visibility. But then once it is released, I will be able to tell whether there was a spillover number supplied and that caused the data filing date to move forward 1 year, or if it is to really accept and understand how many applicants are in the queue based on the demand. We'll wait and watch for the EB1 India final action date table movements here, right? So let's wait and watch in this category closely how the final action date table is going to react in the coming months. Okay, but good news is that the data filing table moved and people are ready to file. Okay, thumbs up. Good job. Happy for that. Okay, EB2 India. Here, basically, we have in the final action date table 3 months forward movement that we're seeing, right? And the EB2 India, we have where the data filing table, we are seeing 10 months forward movement, right? And again, this great news for EB2 India with the amount of backlog that it holds. Definitely, it's a good sign of forward movements that we are seeing, even both on the EB2 India final action date table and also the data filing table. So I think again, it's the same story and speculation that um, because we are pointing towards the data filing table in October 2025 Visa Bulletin, we are going to see the number of applicants coming in the EB2 India category in the next 10 months, who has the next 10 months priority dates, which is, I think, up to, in this case, 1st of December 2013. So um, based on that demand, the date movements for EB to India will be determined in the coming months and quarters of this current fiscal year, 2026. Okay, so let's keep an eye on that because it moved forward 3 months in a quick jump on October 2025 Visa Bulletin, which is good news. But then how far from that it will be moving forward? So when I compare the movements of EB1 India and EB2 India with my predictions between the final action date table and the data filing table for both worst case and best case scenario. So if I take EB1 India actual movement here in October 2025 Visa Bulletin and compare that with my worst case scenario, so there was no change in EB1 India in the actual movement. If I go into worst case scenario, I did predict there might be a retrogression, but that's not the outcome, which is good. And in the best case scenario, I said for the final action date chart, it would move to 3 weeks. In the end, it did not, but eventually it will, right? In the final action date table. And then EB2, it moved 3 months in the final action date table for India. And then if I compare that with worst case scenario final action date table, I said no change. And best case scenario, I said 3 weeks. So of course it went beyond that expectation, and it's definitely a great news. And same for EB1 India data filing table and EB2 India data filing table. The worst case scenario for EB1 India is said negative 10 months retrogression, but again it moved forward 1 year, which is definitely a great forward movement. And for EB2 India, it moved forward 2 months. Sorry, my prediction was 2 months in the worst case scenario, but it moved forward 10 months. So I think worst case scenario here is definitely not the case what we saw in the October 2025 Visa Bulletin. When I go into the best case scenario, EB1 India was 3 months forward movement prediction, and EB2 the same thing. Again, it definitely went beyond that. So glad that it moved thus far, and definitely it's going to be a lot of applicants that's going to start applying for I-485 applications here. So definitely good news because we are going to utilize the data filing table in the October 2025 Visa Bulletin for filing the I-485 applications, right? So that's good thing, and also forward movement in FAD table for EB2 India. That's another good thing. Let's go into EB3 skilled India and EB3 other workers India. Both are going to consistently move in the same way. So it moved 3 months forward movement in the final action date table for EB3 skilled and EB3 other workers India. And then 1 year, 2 months and a week for EB3 skilled and EB3 other workers in the data filing table under India. So this is a great movement also for EB3 category, along with EB2 and EB1 in the data filing table, and the same fashion it moved 3 months forward movement in a final action date table. So again, I continue to see that EB3 will consistently move forward to achieve that date, because it had a steady pace in the previous fiscal year. Earlier, it was predicted that in the previous fiscal year, EB3 skilled and EB3 other workers would reach up to 8th of June 2013, and it went very close to that. So it reached up to 22nd May 2013 in the previous fiscal year. So it met the expectation, close enough. I think I would watch closely here. Even though it says 1 year, 2 months, I doubt it might move up to 1 year, 2 months. It might move close to that. But it is definitely a possible scenario that at least will go beyond 8 months. That is for sure. Okay. And that's my opinion as well. So when I compare this EB3 prediction, actual movement with my prediction between best case and worst case scenario. In EB3 skilled worst case scenario, and other workers under final action date table, I predicted as 2 weeks forward movement, right? But it went beyond it. It did 3 months forward movement, which is definitely good. And also in the worst case scenario for data filing table, it moved. I predicted a 6 months forward movement, but it went 1 year, 2 months and a week. Again, that's good to see that happening. So when I look at the best case scenario, again, I did predict 1.5 months forward movement, but it doubled to close to 3 months forward movement in the final action date table for EB3 skilled and EB3 other workers. In the data filing table for best case scenario, I predicted as 6 months, but again, it went up to 1 year. So it went beyond the predictions, which is definitely great news to hear, right? So good luck to all the applicants in the India backlog country, where we have a lot of applicants waiting in the queue, and this is going to be definitely good news for them to move forward in the process in terms of filing the I-485 and waiting for the biometric and green card EADs, and then go into the queue of pending a I-485, right? That's definitely a good progress for many of us. Now going into the next category. So let's talk about Mexico date movements here in October 2025 Visa Bulletin. For EB1, it stayed current as expected, and it will stay current in the current fiscal year. That is the anticipation. And that is in both final action date table and the data filing table for the entire fiscal year of 2026. That's the anticipation. EB2, Mexico. Again, Mexico is going to follow the exact same pattern what you will see in the rest of the world category. Mainly because the demand for EB1 Mexico is comparatively low, and that would spill over to the high demand areas if there is any. And that's the prediction here, and that's why you would see that that it would try to catch up with rest of the world date movements, and you're also seeing that here in the final action date table, that you can see the exact dates that are replicated in the Mexico category and also the Philippines category, that I will come to that shortly. But yeah, so entire fiscal year, the anticipation is Mexico will closely follow the rest of the world dates. Unless if there is any drastic change in the demand across these EB categories. That is going to be the summary from my side, because the date movements in both data filing and the final action date chart are exactly the same as rest of the world. So it's going to be the same summary for Mexico. Going into Philippines, okay, so it's very similar, that EB1, EB2, and EB3 other workers entirely followed exact same date movements as rest of the world. But the catch here is you can see the EB3 skilled for Philippines, it moved 1 month and 3 weeks, okay, in the final action date table under October 2025 Visa Bulletin. And if you look at EB3 skilled under Philippines for data filing table, it moved 4 months and 3 weeks, right? If you compare that with EB3 skilled and data filing table and the final action table for rest of the world, if I go back in a moment here, you can see there was no change in EB3 skilled as we talked about it for final action date table, and there was a 3-month forward movement in the data filing table. And the Philippines moved 4 months and 3 weeks, and it exactly caught up with the rest of the world date. As you can see here, it was a month and a half lower in the priority date movement in the previous fiscal year. When it reached September 2025, it was like 1 month and a half behind the rest of the world date. Now, with this new visa numbers starting this fiscal year, it caught up to meet that date. So you can see final action date table move a month and 3 weeks compared to no change in the rest of the world category on the final action date table, and 4 months and 3 weeks forward movement in the EB3 skill category for data filing table compared to 3 months forward movement in the rest of the world category, right? So I think mainly the cause of this is maybe mainly because there was definitely low demand on the EB1 Philippines and higher visa number available there. And then also in the EB2 category, there's comparatively low demand. And then you would see those numbers definitely passed on to EB3 skilled. And that's what I'm looking at. Also, some numbers from EB3 other workers could have been carried forward, but definitely there is internal spillover. Maybe that's the prediction, as demand is high in the EB3 skilled category. The other low demand areas numbers may have been stated as not required, quote unquote, not required. In this case, that will then transfer to the high demand areas, and that's what I speculate, that those numbers are being applied to make the EB3 skill Philippines move forward quite a bit in this case. And then I think rest of the fiscal year, in the fiscal year 2026, you would see the Philippines EB3 skilled along with other categories will follow closely with the rest of the world dates as well, unless if there is any drastic change happens in the EB3 skill demand for Philippines. And it's definitely a good news for the Philippines to look at this kind of date movements that aligns with rest of the world and Mexico, because in overall, priority date movements, India and China are going to be seen as a backlog countries with a huge backlog. But then, as long as we have the rest of the world, Mexico and Philippines are aligned and synced up, definitely that will be a good news for the backlog countries, because most of the numbers, if the demand is adjusted and balanced out within these three areas, then if there is any spillover numbers that are coming through in future, and if those are definitely, if those are not required in rest of the world, Mexico and Philippines, that might be applied to backlog countries. And it's going to be that kind of an approach maybe in the future, in fiscal years, once we get these main three areas of rest of the world, Mexico and Philippines, get to a current state, which is the ideal situation. But we'll wait and watch, how many fiscal years is going to take to stabilize the main areas of rest of the world, Mexico and Philippines, and then address the fast forward movement in backlog countries. But in a short term, even though you did not see much of date movements in EB3 skilled and EB3 other workers for rest of the world, compared to the September Visa Bulletin, I'm going to be staying positive in this, that after at least first couple of months in the current fiscal year, you will start to see a steady state forward movements, and on both final action date table and the data filing table. So it's not going to be staying like this forever, right? That's for sure. So I will keep you posted on this data whenever I get new backlog information updates. And also, as I said in this video before, that I do not have the numerical limits number yet while I review this content. Once I have that numerical limits, how much is applied for employment-based category for fiscal year 2026, I should be able to talk to you about the numbers if there are any spillovers applied here. Okay, if the number is above 140K for employment-based category in the current fiscal year. All right. I think this has been a long video, but I think it is worth to go over each of this comparison and understand the reasoning behind it. But overall, I am really happy for most of the categories here and almost all of the categories here, which is seeing the forward movements in data filing table. Yeah, that is what will be utilized in the at least in the current month of October 2025 Visa Bulletin. So good luck to all of you, and hope for the best in the coming months.